Hey y'all, Erin here. It's the 1st of July, so I'm filming my June reading wrap-up. Just off frame is my dog chewing on a toy, so hopefully she doesn't make a whole bunch of noise, but you know she's gonna interrupt at some point. So I'm pleased to report that I survived the Pacific Northwest heat wave. I've never experienced 109 degrees before. I hope never to experience it again. Infinitely prefer our cool overcast days like we have today where I can throw on my flannel shirts. So, June. I actually did quite a bit of reading this month, in part because it was too hot to move, and so I wasn't doing any of the other things that usually occupy my time, like knitting, sewing, and gardening. So first book this month was Professional Troublemaker, The Fear-Fighting Manual by Luvvie Ajayi Jones. And that one was a recommendation from a knitter that I follow on Instagram. Her account is Gigi Made It. She's just like a delightful, positive influence. Like, I smile every time she shows up in my feed, so when she recommended a book, I thought I'd go ahead and read it, and I'm really glad that I did. I am a person with a lot of anxiety. I'm not good at confrontation, so I was really hoping that a book called The Fear-Fighting Manual would help me fight some fear, and it did have some good advice in it. It's not really focused at like anxiety fear, it's more focused at like social situations where you just know that conflict is going to happen, so it's better to be prepared. So it includes things like negotiating for enough money when you're, you know, at your work, or setting boundaries respectfully. She used the example of she does not like hugs, so that is a boundary that she sets, and I was like, yes, because I also hate hugs, and it's only very recently that I've felt comfortable enough like setting that boundary. If I don't hug, I don't like them, I won't do it. So the primary audience for Professional Troublemaker is definitely more Black women particularly, but I do think that it's a book that anyone who has some sort of lack of privilege is going to be able to relate. So women especially, or trans folks, queer folks, basically the only people that aren't going to, you know, be like, oh my god, this is so relatable and I can totally use this advice, are cishet white men, because they already get all the money when they apply for a job. They don't need to learn how to negotiate for more. So when I finished that one, I read Almost American Girl by Robin Ha, which was a graphic memoir, and it reminded me of how much I love reading graphic memoirs. It's been ages since I'd read any. Hers was really sweet, focused on maybe a 2 or 3 year time span, and it was her and her mother moving from South Korea to the United States. And so the story is kind of her story of integration into the American culture. When she moved here, she was starting high school. She was 8th or 9th grade, I can't remember exactly. And she did not speak any English. And it's the difficulties that she had at school. The first school she went to didn't have an ESL program. There were definitely moments in the story that made me like, oh, baby. But overall, it's like a really sweet, cute, feel-good story. I really liked the relationship that she had with her mother. I thought it was very sweet, that it was kind of very consistently like the two of them against the world. And I really liked that dynamic. Then I read Full Disclosure by Camryn Garrett. So Full Disclosure is about a 16, 17-ish year old girl. And she has HIV. She's HIV positive. And she's getting to that age where she's like interested in sex, and she has a crush on, you know, the cute boy at school who it turns out also likes her. And so a lot of it is focused on her trying to figure out when and how to disclose that she's HIV positive, because she knows that she has to, but it's feeling very like a very scary thing. And she starts getting notes, threatening notes saying that I know you're HIV positive, and if you don't break up with this boy, I'm gonna tell the whole school, blah, blah, blah. She doesn't feel comfortable talking to the adults around her about what's going on. She does have, I would say, a very good and close relationship with her fathers. She does have 2 fathers, which I thought was a sweet touch. So it was a little unclear to me reading this book why it was that she didn't want to just tell her parents. And some of it seemed to be that when she got outed at her previous school, they made her change schools, and she didn't want to have to change schools this time. So maybe that was the whole fear. It did seem a little bit like teenager making a slightly silly choice, but they're teenagers, they make silly choices. It's kind of in the definition of being a teenager, I think. Overall, really great story. I loved the use of, she was directing the school play, and they were putting on a production of Rent. I thought that was really great. The weaving of the Broadway into it, and overall, very enjoyable story. I think I gave it 4 stars. I don't know if it's one that I'm going to want to reread, but I was glad that I picked it up. And that was the end of the feel goods. So June was, you know, a year since George Floyd was murdered by a police officer. And this time last year, I didn't feel like I needed to pick up a bunch of books about racism. I have a bachelor's in women and gender studies. At least half of my classes for that bachelor's degree, maybe even more, were focusing on the concept of privilege and intersectionality and racism. And so like I was kind of in that position where I was like, I get it. This is the time for me to start to be out on the streets being actively anti-racist, not the time for me to be the white person that joins the book club and says things like, you know, thoughts and prayers and I'm listening and learning. And no, I was past that moment. I had more important things to do than read books. But what I'm finding now, 1 year on, is that, yes, I get it. Not everyone in my family gets it yet. And I'm finding that very frustrating because I don't know how to explain to them that the things that they are doing are in fact racist, and that being accused of being racist is not the end of the world. Every white person is racist because we all benefit from systemic racism. Absolutely every single one of us. And anyone who says otherwise is lying to themselves. And unfortunately, they're in that lying to themselves category. And I find it very frustrating. It has caused me to stop talking to chunks of my family, which is not really where I want to be. Part of me just doesn't care because there's, you know, we got other family drama going on. But with my husband's family, you know, I love them very much. I feel like I can get there if we could just wean them off Fox News, get them to start thinking a little bit more critically, because they're not bad people. And so I was trying to find books that would give me the language that I needed to reach them in a gentle way, because I'm not always gentle with my language, and sometimes it can, you know, turn people off of what you're saying if you're not saying it in the right way. So I know that I can't open the conversation with, y'all are racist, let me tell you why. I needed better examples. So my mom lent me, This is the Fire, What I Say to My Friends About Racism by Don Lemon, who I will admit, I had no idea who that was. I don't watch CNN. I get all of my news from NPR, listening to the radio while I'm at work. And it was a good book. It was not the book that I need to reach my in-laws because they're in the CNN is fake news camp. So anything that's coming from someone affiliated with CNN is going to be automatically out for them. I also kind of feel like maybe having a black gay man is going to be a step too far. If we can get them to accept one and then the other, maybe we'll make some progress that way, because they're not all that hip on the queers either. They're very religious is the thing. So yeah, it was a good book. It didn't have anything in it that I didn't already know. But it was a quick read. It only took me like a day and a half to finish the whole thing. So I followed that one with, ta-da! So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo. This one I loved. So Ijeoma is a local author for me. She is a Seattleite. Delightful references to Seattle in here that made me go, ooh, 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 I know where that is. This one was more concrete, how to have these conversations. I don't think I could be so lucky as to get my beloved family members that need to be led to the light to actually read this book, but there are definitely things in it, particularly the chapters talking about education, because some of my family members are teachers, that I think that could be a way to kind of bring them in. So we're gonna, have that welcome to the light side conversation. So yes, would highly recommend. Very glad I bought it. Definitely gonna go through it on many more times. And in fact, today I bought her second book, Mediocre, because So You Want to Talk About Race was so good. I was like, yes, please continue to explain these things to me, because she's got the language that I don't have to explain why we need to just being silent is not enough. We need to be actively anti-racist. So How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi is also on my TBR. And by the time I finished those two, I needed a little break. So I read Lost in the Neverwoods by Aiden Thomas. This is their second novel. The first one was Cemetery Boys, which I loved. Lost in the Neverwoods came out fairly recently, and it got some flack when it was first announced because all of the characters in it are cis and straight. And people were like, well, but you're a trans author, you should be writing trans characters, which I think is a very unfair criticism, because trans people do not owe you their pain. There's no rule saying that everything they do has to be about their own identity and experience. And, this book is writing from the dominant cultural paradigm. There's no way that anyone who lives in the United States is going to be like, what? I don't know how to write a white, cis, straight person's experience. Like, that's the automatically assumed experience. So, very straight story. That being said, it was super freaking cute. I love a retelling of a fairy tale. This is a retelling of Peter Pan. I thought it was adorable. Like, super dramatic, very, like, it's not high literature by any means, but it was fun and relaxing, and it didn't take long, and I will definitely return to it in the future when I'm like, my brain melted, I want something cute. It's one of those. It was a cute one. On the same day that I finished Lost in the Neverwoods, I also finished a book of poetry. Has a word that I am not going to say. I Am Nobody's Inworm, by Dean Atta. And the poem by that name I thought was really great. It was basically a repudiation of the idea of taking back this word full of hate. I know that that's going to be something very controversial. It's something that I kind of sit on the fence on with regard to the language used around queer folks. I was... That might be Amazon with my book orders. I was never one of those, the queers that was comfortable with calling each other faggot. I don't like it. So I found this poem very relatable. Overall, though, I would say that, so this was Dean Atta's first published collection, and I started with Black Flamingo, which he wrote much later, and in comparison, Black Flamingo is definitely better. This one feels very young, which makes sense because he was very young, but it's a lot of like self-exploration with maybe not quite knowing who he is yet. Totally fine. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're only going to read one of his works, pick up Black Flamingo. It's better. Okay, both my feet are totally asleep. I'm gonna get shorter here. Ooh, there we go. Ow. I don't know why I do this every time. I kneel so that I'm tall enough, and then my feet fall asleep, and it's very painful. Hi, Mia. It's not playtime. No, it's not playtime. Okay, so in the I enjoy a good fairy tale retelling vein, I also read Cinderella is Dead by Bayron. My own handwriting is not good, y'all. So this one is, obviously, it's a twist on the Cinderella story. Sorry, my feet are like tingling. I'm trying to decide if I should try and cut this and stitch it together later, but I'm not good at editing. So I'm gonna push through. So this book, as a feminist manifesto, is not subtle, which I'm fine with. The intended audience is teens. It is a young adult book. And sometimes, you can't be subtle with the teens. You gotta get them on the feminist bandwagon early. Hook them young. If I thought that I could get my nieces to read this book, I would absolutely try and sneak it into their reading, and then I would get in so much trouble later. And point in this book's favor, I was actually genuinely surprised by the plot twist at the end, which I am not often surprised by the plot twists. So that was really fun. Queer main characters, lesbian main characters, not just gay men. Because, can't just be all about the boys all the time. Really liked it. Also, I love a lesbian that's confident with a knife. It's just... I was talking about that with the Loki TV shows in a group too, that I like a close range fighter, knife user. It's my favorite in tabletop games too. I don't ever play one because I like to stand in the back and shoot fireballs, but my favorite ones to watch being played. Knife fighters. So that got on a little nerd tangent. Let's reel it back in. So another nonfiction for the month was Wow, No Thank You, essays by Samantha Irby, which, oh my god, I was actually genuinely laughing out loud. Okay, we're gonna try and shift again. Here we go. Yeah, she's being cute now. I want to let you guys see her being cute. Isn't that better? Okay. It's better than trying to throw the ball at me. So, Wow, No Thank You. Super relatable, super funny. Kept laughing out loud and reading bits to my husband, who was maybe not as amused as I was, but basically there was something in every single one of the essays that I wanted to share with someone. So if you just need like a good chuckle, pick that one up. So the next, I finished that one, and then I picked up Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. So the reason that I picked up Pet, I've been trying to read Americanah all year, having no success. I made it halfway through. I was not enjoying it. I'm not into contemporary literature. It's just not my bag. I am definitely the fantasy sci-fi reader. But people, you know, all over the internet kept telling me how important this book was, and it was so good, and it would teach you so much, and so I was trying to read it, and basically looking for an excuse to stop trying to read it. And the author, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, apparently is a TERF, which, if you're unfamiliar, that's a trans-exclusive radical feminist. So she is known for her feminism. And a huge issue within the feminist movement and within every movement towards social justice is that we spend all our time like down here fighting amongst ourselves instead of being able to be up here fighting the patriarchy and fighting racism and fighting queerphobia and transphobia. And this is where we need to be. And instead we get sucked in, like with J.K. Rowling and this turfy nonsense of trying to say that trans women aren't women and we need to make sure that we're excluding them from these women-only spaces. And that's total bullshit. And it's that kind of infighting and that kind of transphobia that will keep us from ever being able to dismantle the patriarchy. And that's the goal. So, I'm getting very political this time. It's a bit unusual for me. Maybe the fear fighting manual was working. I'm feeling more confrontational already. So apparently she's had this long history of turfy statements, at least going back to 2015 from what I could find. But I was unaware of all of that when I picked up her book, and it wasn't until I was on Instagram, I think it was Boris Queer Reads, but I could be wrong because I follow several accounts with queer and reading in the name, and sometimes I get them mixed up. But they said something about her being a TERF, and we should be supporting non-binary authors instead, including Akwaeke Emezi, who is non-binary and was a student of Adichie. And Adichie put out this whole big long statement just like last week about students that had done her wrong, and she didn't name anybody, but a lot of people were like, oh, it's these two people. Jess Owens of book CommuniTea covered it on her video, and I will link to that video down below because she has the receipts I do not have the receipts for that. So anyway, so I picked up Pet. I read it. It was great. I really enjoyed it. It was Mia, hush, hush. It was really dark, really heavy, but hopeful at the same time. Hi, baby. Yes, you're a good girl. I'm almost done, okay? Again, not subtle, but that's fine. Not everything has to be a work of subtle genius. It was super short. It only took me a couple hours to read, and I enjoyed the entire premise. The premise in this is that there are monsters and there are angels, and the angels, these are all people, metaphorical monsters and angels, and the metaphorical angels defeated the monsters, and now they're living in this society where they've successfully defeated the patriarchy and racism and transphobia and queerphobia, and, you know, they're living in that utopia. But as it turns out, maybe the monsters aren't actually all gone. And our main character is a trans girl named Jam, and she accidentally awakens a monster hunter, and it's the process of her and the monster hunter who says to call them Pet, hunting. So after I read it, and again, I'll link to Jess Owen's The CommuniTea video, because as it turns out, Emezi has maybe not been the best behaved either, and there were like threats of violence, and I'm not here for that nonsense on either side. Like, I don't care how much you disagree with someone, threatening them with violence is not the way to fix anything. So I don't know that I will read any more of her books. But I did enjoy this. Sorry, their books. Ooh, that was bad. I don't know if I'll read any more of their books, but I did enjoy this one. And the last book that I read in June was A Year Without a Name by Cyrus Dunham. And I found this one through MB Book Club, and they had gotten together with the Feminist Book Club. And Feminist Book Club is a subscription service that you can sign up for, and you get sent a book a month. And they have various tiers, so this is the middle tier where you just get the book. And I just thought it was really cool, and I was interested in reading more non-binary voices, because that's even harder to find than trans authors. And so I was like really excited and signed up, and I got the book, and I'm glad that I signed up, because next month's Feminist Book Club book looks fantastic, because it's fairy tales, and I've said it several times already that I like the fairy tales. This one, on the other hand, was not a winner for me. I think that what I wanted it to be was an exploration of a trans non-binary identity. I wanted it to be gender focused. And what it was a sort of chaotic exploration of their other mental illnesses. And I'm not saying that, you know, if you're gonna write a book about being non-binary, that you have to like be the perfect gold star non-binary. I do not want it to sound like that's what I'm saying here. But I didn't find it, it's always hard to talk about a memoir because I don't want it to sound like I'm judging someone else's life. But this is not the book to read if you are looking for ammunition to explain to people why non-binary and trans identities are perfectly valid and should be respected. This is a book about someone who is deeply confused very depressed, very anxious, almost painfully self-aware, self-centered even, I would say. Sort of obsessed with fame and doing a lot of drugs, and that just nothing about that was appealing to me. Nothing about it was relatable to me. Well, except for being depressed and anxious, but I try not to be one of those like, ooh, I'm judging you, you do drugs people, but I don't do drugs. I'm not interested in doing drugs. I don't like being out of control. I don't like being outside of my own head. And so that was really kind of a turnoff for me reading this book, was that they just seem chaotic and out of control through all of it. And unfortunately, that was the note that I ended the month on. So I am currently partway through Dark Forest, which is the second book in the Three Body Problem trilogy, and I'm also reading The Race to the Sun, which is a middle grade book out of the Rick Riordan Presents series, and so I'm excited about both of those, and I'm going to stop talking to you now and go downstairs where it's a little bit cooler and read. So y'all stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you later.